Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Natsu. I'm very excited, and I had a friend who told me about you, and he said if he achieved 1% of what you achieved, he would be happy with his life. That is quite a statement. Yeah, I'd love to first begin with who is Natsu?
That friend, I don't know. I feel like I haven't done anything in my life yet. So there's a lot more to do. I think this is what happens when you start doing things and you realize that there's a lot more for you to do things, right? So I am kind of like building a startup around motion design space called Lottie Files. I'm here based out here in Korea, so amazing place to be. I'm from the Maldives, tiny islands. You're stuck in an island with a laptop, and what happens is that you learn everything inside it, right? So that's a little bit about me. I'm married to a Korean here. One of the reasons I'm here as well. So, yeah, I'm really happy and excited to be here.
Yeah. And Lottie Flies, going more, what is Lottie Flies? And for audience at home, it raised Series B, funded by M12, Microsoft, 500 startups.
Yeah, so um, before you talk about Lottie fast, you have to know what Lottie is, right? So before Lottie, there was this GIF or PNG sequences or sprites to create an animation and bring that to your product. What Lottie did was kind of like save the same files from After Effects to a JSON file, and then there's a JSON kind of a player that you can put on any website or app that plays these files. So it kind of revolutionized bringing motion to your products. That is Lottie. Extremely lightweight compared to a GIF. It's about like 6 times smaller. And it's vector based. So that means you can change the colors. Even if you resize, the size stays the same. One of the reasons why top companies initially adopted the format as well. So Lottie Files revolves around Lottie. So we are a community. We are all the services, plugins, and tools around this format. We were the first ones to actually start with this journey, while Lottie was almost very, very few. We have about 96 people across 17 different countries right now. So 100% remote organization. So we raised Series B, I think 2 years ago, still going strong. And we are trying to build something and make a difference in the motion design space.
Going back a bit, your backstory is from the Maldives, a country of, I think, 500,000 people. And
we rounded off to 500, but it's less
oh,
than
really?
that. Yeah.
And I saw that the airport, there's a city, and the city is almost the same size as the airport. How is the process like? What was your journey from Maldives to here?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the south of Maldives. We are next to the equator with an island which is about 4 square kilometers.
Wow.
When you get out of the house, you don't see any other islands. You only see your sky. That's where your kind of whole lives revolves around it. We used to say, like, we don't even measure distance by distance. We measure distance by time. That means my friend's house is 2 minutes away. We don't even know what a kilometer looks like, right? So that's where I was born and raised. Didn't do very well in school, so just started with the computers. That's kind of the life, and I think I still brings the chill side of the living in an island or from an island to my life now, even though life is very different here in Korea, or to even build a startup is very, very different. We've started Lottie Fast with a lot of folks that I met back at home from the Maldives, and a lot of engineers still, and part of the leadership also comes from the Maldives side as well. So they've been the greatest help, but also kind of mindset that helps us to say, like, hey, we are new, we are small, we are isolated in an island, let's just give our best. Lottie Falls, I think, is the first VC-backed company that came from a Maldives team. So I think this is sort of an inspiration that we shouldn't just stick in an island, but we can actually go and capture the world.
And what was the journey like just before you built Lottie Flies? What were you doing? And
yeah, Maldives, everybody knows that they are good for resorts. They're one of the best places to go. So, of course, I was in marketing, e-marketing side, and also building, working for newspapers and others. But I think the biggest part that came from my entrepreneurial journey is kind of building a web agency that did websites and mobile apps for the government and other leading companies in the Maldives. That was the journey. It didn't do very well because it was very hard to scale. Me and my closest like friends and my best friend. We both were running the business and then also coding day and night to scale it, but it was very, very hard. So for 5 years, we were just self-employed and trying to do this. And that was a big learning that actually I think we don't think it back then, but now when we think about it, a lot of things that we learn through that journey.
Wow. And I saw that you also worked as a senior project manager at Mind Valley, and you had newspaper or news site for the Maldives called Maldives.net.
Yeah. So again, from the travel side of things, like I love taking photos, like huge contributor to Unsplash as well, and also promoting the country. We're very, very passionate about Maldives. So it's a nice domain to start that with one of my friends as well. So there's a news and one of the leading Maldives news going in there. In terms of my personal career journey, I think I realized in Maldives, I'm kind of stuck. I need to push through. So moved to Malaysia for personal reasons as well. And within there, I've started learning about lean startup and kind of like going more product side of things rather than just doing the tech, which I was doing back in the Maldives quite a lot. So lean startup was one of the stepping stones to kind of explore the startup journey.
And you said your first 2 years in Lottie Flies, it wasn't like serious actual business. What was that like, and when did you start treating it as a business?
Yeah. So Lottie first started as a funny way. I was working for this company called Service Hero. They do like handyman and services for Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And I joined this team as that was the time I shifted from a UX UI person to a product designer. So there was a lot to learn. And my boss back then, who was leading the tech, one of the co-founders is the current CEO and co-founder of Supabase, Couple. So
I love Supabase.
I know we all love it. And so that was the time that a lot of things let's say even the news of Lottie being open sourced by Airbnbs, and over the weekend I was just trying to build something around Lottie files. And I think a lot of things what followed was us kind of using Lottie at work with Couple and other folks in the company. That means if I have this animation file, if I send to Couple, he might just say, hey, I need to see this I don't want to go and download a JavaScript library in order to see the file. So I did those features to Lottie Fast where you can drag and drop the file to any place on the website and it will immediately show what it looks like. So that became a huge pain point that was solved for a lot of other people who were at that time playing around with Lottie as well, right? So that was sort of the journey, and of course never treated Lottie as hey, this is going to be the big thing or it's going to even be a product, because it was very much like community. Hey, there's this cool thing that I do over the weekend, try to build this up small. And we were doing a lot of other startup sort of things over weekends again, like working from cafes, right? So for 2 years, this was just the weekend thing. After Service Hero, I moved to Mind Valley, and that's where I met my current co-founder, Kay.
When was the moment when you realized Lottie was a big thing? And how did it feel like?
I think even on the early stage, we had a lot of big companies like Uber to Airbnbs and a few other companies just talking to us saying that, hey, this feature, this function needs to be changed. Or can you help us with it? Can you help us investigate it? So that conversation over Twitter was happening. I love Twitter where, now X, that you can talk to anybody. Even in large organizations, there are people that you can just reach out to and just have a chat with. That was amazing. I think that was a good foundation to build Lottie Fast on top of, where a lot of people are using it and knew about it and really cared about it. And I remember we were even celebrating the 10 files, 15 files, 20 files, 1,000 downloads, 2,000 downloads, and even on Facebook saying that, hey, look, our weekend project got us 50,000 downloads, and now millions and millions, right? So I think those small wins, but I think compounded that at one day. It's not like one day we woke up and say, hey, today's the day that we want to, but I think it started brewing in our mind. We tried different approaches, but finally we were like, hey, maybe it's this time. So Kay came in and we were like, hey, let's just start this as a business first. get an entity, and then think about what is the direction that we can take. By then, I think there's this term like validated by the community is already there. That means it's already being used. I think we were about 1.8 million downloads when we initially thought about like, hey, let's just quit our day job and come full time on this.
1.8 million. That's
Yeah.
that's a lot. And you raised, I think, a total of around $57 million.
Yeah.
Is there a moment raising money where it kind of was like, wow, I got this much money? Was there?
I think, I mean, close to like 50 mil, I think, to be correct. And within Series A was about 9 and Series B was about 37. So not really, because I think this startup was in more of a fast-paced company. So you don't really get time to stop and think about, oh, we have a lot of money. I think we were like, hey, we need to use this money to scale this company. And because it's also fast-paced, what are the things that we need to do? So I think from day one, I've been on the operational side of things very well, as much as like on the strategic level as well. So it's also a good thing, and it's also a bad thing as well when you have the money. And when we raise Series B, we haven't really started monetizing as well. So there's a lot of responsibility.
Really? Wow.
There's a lot of responsibility to make this as a viable business. So I think this is, right now we end that part.
What would your advice be to early startups on finding product market fit, building a community, and just for early startups in general?
Yeah, I think this is a lot to take that in. Like learning from us, I think like our case was a little bit different, where we wanted the format to be like adopted by before we could even go charging. But I think charging early, or at least get your monetization in place a little bit, because just like your startup, you're going to do a lot of experiments with monetization as well. Some things may work, some things may not work as well. So I think early stage, you have a lot more room to play around. So like us as founders, we were like, if you build a product, the market will come. And then we build the product and we're disappointed that the market is in there. So as an early stage, you have to do quite a lot. And don't ignore the monetization and sales side of things, because with monetization, people will honestly tell you how they feel about the product. If I try to sell you my product and say, hey, can you pay money for this? You will give me your honest feedback rather than validating sometimes in the community. It could be a great product, but it may not be a great fit for the problem solution, but it may not be a good PMF to actually get money for.
What's your advice and lessons you've learned about just building a company at your scale?
Yeah. Building a company at our scale, there's no right or wrong way as a founder, because there's so many variables. That's why if you look at it, every company is very, very different. I think in our case, we are like, the trust is a really big part. Like, trust people that you actually bring in and let them do the best. Give them the best, treat them the best. In our case, the culture is one of the most important, the biggest reason why our team kind of stays. So it's not solely on your responsibility either, but I think you foster or you create the space for that to exist. And still be a part of that journey, right? As a founder, this is my first time being in a company at this scale, and longest time ever being in a journey or in a company. So I'm learning, I think, just like everybody else. I'm growing and learning at the same time. I think one advice would be, we are very scared about that we might make the wrong decision. I think rather than being scared about it, no company has ever gone down because you made one bad move. I think you make a series of bad moves that leads to that final decision that kind of things falls apart. So keep an eye on, don't be scared about that one decision that you're going to make, which is unpopular or controversial or some of those things. Just make it, but follow it through and kind of learn from it, rather than just be scared of making those decisions. I think a lot, even in our case, we haven't made certain decisions that we were supposed to make, and we kind of dwell on it for a longer period and eventually we still have to make those decisions. This is about hiring people. This is also about letting people go. This is also about building the products, which products to keep, which products to pivot. And so there's a lot of decisions that you need to make, and just keep making them and you get better at them.
And where do you go about learning and figuring out what decisions to make? Because you said you learn from resources. Who do you listen to?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I think a few books that I listen to, and of course, audiobooks as well. I think Elliot Gill's High Growth Handbook is sort of it's published by Stripe as well. It's really good because it's not like a book that you read from start to end, but this is more of a handbook where you want to read a certain part. One example from the book is like, how do you deal with old timers? That means when you started the startup, there are people there, but they're not as functioning as they should be right now. That means they're not growing at the same pace as the company, and their company has outgrown them. How do you deal with them, right? So I think a lot of these advices for founders in the early stages as well, it is there. Even though your companies may not be growing that high growth right now, but it's good to learn. On the podcast side, I really enjoy How I Built This, NPR, by Guy Raz, and then of course Masters of Scale as well, Reid Hoffman. Really good two ones that I actually listen to.
And talking about like founders, what are your favorite founders that you look up to, or just people in general in the world?
Yeah, I think Brian Chesky is of course one because of design-led organizations, and I truly believe that designers usually think about a lot. Even when they're designing, like, how is this design going to be perceived? What problem am I solving? To a lot of that mindset is there. I think a lot of great founders can come from design background because of all of these thinking. It's not just about how you build it, but why you build it, how you build it. A lot of that care actually comes from that as well, right? So I would say like Brian Chesky is just one to listen to.
And talking about design, before Lottie Flies or the early stages of Lottie Flies, you had a kind of like a TED Talk. It wasn't a TED Talk, but you had a presentation about, and I could see in your eyes the passion you had for design. What makes what are the parts of design that you really enjoy?
So this is also part of like growing up in Maldives, where you can't just phone somebody and say, hey, can you come and do my design? So you end up becoming everything. Means if you need plumbing, you're the ones to do it. You need a handyman, you're the ones to do it. If you need a design for your tech or back end or the front end, you have to be there, right? So I ended up becoming sort of the product designer and learning about like UX and UI, and then started really doing it. And this is like very early stage. I'm talking about Adobe Fireworks to like Dreamweavers to all of those things as well. Probably you weren't even born back then. But so I think like learning from all of these, that kind of like you started being very, very passionate about. And at that time, Maldives, like, we're a small nation, so we don't really have many people doubling around with UI, UX design, and then all of that, right? So that I think the passion came as I learned through kind of looking at products that are being done in the US and everywhere else. So like, hey, this looks really nice. How did they build it? What is the story behind it? What made them create this design this way? That inspired me to go and kind of like do the web agency and try to recreate some of these startups as well.
And what would you say is your favorite design company, or a company of your favorite designs?
Oh, this is a tricky one. Now I think it has mixed with all of the products there, but I think when we look at, or at least use the products daily, like Linear is very nicely done. I think the products that we usually feel like, this is such a pain to use. For example, like Jira, if you mention about Jira to anybody who's doing product like management, they're like, this is just too much stuff, right? So I think there's a lot new products that are coming in and say, this is how you can mix design and functions together and still bring the most boring things in the world to the most enjoyable, usable products out there. Linear is one of them, and there's of course a lot more. Like Vercel is doing some on there, and there's also Superbase. It's like it started with database, but it's a lot more, and it's kind of an enjoyable kind of experience. Even though they are built for developers, we used to see like really crappy design products. I'm not looking at AWS, but for even developers, I think like you still can have a great company, you still can build a great product and give great functions and still with great design. So I'm excited and happy to see a lot of companies kind of like making design a priority now, and there's examples coming every single day.
And talking about design, if you could kind of go more in depth into what Lotify's mission is, because one of it that I understand is motion design enabling ease of use and great motion design for developers and for companies and for people.
Yeah, so just like any company, or like we look at organizations as kind of living and breathing organizations, so or organisms. So of course the mission changes over time a little bit as well. So now we are, initially when we started, it was more of like lightweight animations everywhere. Now the mission is to bring motion to every app and website on the planet, right? So the thinking more about the mission is today a lot of things, when we look at they're very static. What motions helps us is to bring kind of emotion into the product. So we want the products that you engage day in and day out should be more emotionally connected to you, rather than just here's a button that I just click and something comes on the screen. I think Korean apps, they do this very well, where they kind of bring in characters and animations and motion into that. So our goal is to bring that animation to every app and digital screen on the planet. That's what we move towards with. A lot of folks, they don't think about motion today, because again, motion is hard to do. If you look at like even to create and build it and implement it, it has been painful, and we want to change it.
Yeah, it took me like I'm a beginner, and it took me like 4 hours to figure out like a simple design for this thumbnail I have to move around in an app I created. But talking about the community and talking about people, your community is very strong, and a lot of people love it. What are some of the lessons and things you've done to build a great community?
I think on a community, you have to think from two ends, which is people who are contributing, of course, your most valuable asset, but also people who are coming and consuming them. So for example, licensing, a lot of times like we struggle with attribution and other stuff as well. So licensing and it took us a while to figure out our licensing model for freely contributed files. The other one is it's just a place to showcase, right? So showcase with a new tool. I know designers are very passionate to learn new tools. As you learn new tools, can you create content with that? And then can you give it back? So unlike, let's say, Instagram and others, which is kind of showcasing your work, Lottifast is more of like giving it back to the community, where I'm allowing somebody to come and use the animation that I've created, maybe for a great presentation that they're doing, by customizing their or this animation to their brand colors, so that it feels more natural and feels more belonging to their brand, to use that on products, websites, apps, everywhere else as well. So it's also great to see that people who are consuming it, they're not just designers, these are just developers as well. Like 35% of Lottifast user base is still developers, means that they come and consume these animations, customize them, and put it there. One of the great things that we heard like from a developer is like, I had this freelance project that I was doing, and then I just put a motion in there, a Lottie animation in there, and the client was like so excited and happy, saying that this is next level. Like, you're designing this? Are you a designer? And then all he did was came to Lottifast, customized an animation to their colors, and used it. I also think the file format plays a huge role as well, because it's not like every day you get a format that is loved by designers and developers. If you think about it, this is a motion file in a JSON format. Developers love JSON files.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so, and designers, they want to bring in motion. So the conversation between designers and developers are the highest friction usually there is, but because this file is loved by both of them, and most of the times it's just the developers suggesting, saying, hey, create a lot of animations instead of giving me this heavy, clunky GIF, right? So I think there's multiple parts to this, which is community to kind of showcase my work, and as I'm learning and I want to give back. There's also part about kind of like my animations are being used by other people. Therefore, it encourages me to, like, I can see the amount of downloads and then all of that too. And then also the common goal that we want to bring more Lotties in the world so that more products will end up using that as well. So there's like a lot of those mixed together to actually create that community. And also now we've started doing a lot of physical events. Like last year we had about 80.
Wow.
So there's a lot of like events popping here and there with local communities.
And you guys also fund the Figma conference in San Francisco.
So we've been a great partner and also a sponsor as well. So last year we were there. I was there like with the pool booth as well. So and this year as well. So that's something that we're excited about. There's a lot of people, like about 8,000 to 10,000 people.
Wow.
Product designers from these amazing companies. And I think even then it's great to hear that most of the ones that we meet, they were like, hey, we actually use Lottie. Here and then we learn about their use cases and see what we can actually improve on the product. Just like Figma, there's also Adobe Max as well that we are usually part of, because again, After Effects and that community as well. So I think one of the greatest part about Lottie is that we get to work with these amazing folks. Like Adobe is there, there's Webflow, there's Figma, there's Framer, there's Canva. One of the most recent integrations, anything that you see in Canva is or moving, or all those stickers, all of them are Lottie animations as well, right? So there's that's sort of like the integrations that we've done so far.
Wow, that is crazy. Wow. In our school as well, people use Canva, and I see them using animations.
Yeah.
So you made that.
So my son, he's 11 and he goes to Korean school here, and they're learning and they're using Canva to do all of their presentations and most of these things as well. So of course we have our own plugin in Canva, so he uses Lottie animation. He also teaches other kids how to use Lottie animations.
Did the other kids know that?
Yeah. I mean, he knows, like he has. He's one of our biggest evangelists, where he has Lottie stickers on his iPad and everywhere else as well, right? So I think if we can build products that can be used by 10-year-old, 11-year-olds to give a great storytelling, and if they are exposed to motion in this early stage, I think it's going to be very, very, like the kind of products, presentations, everything that we'll see in the future is going to be pretty different.
And how do you manage, because this is such a big company and you have such great community, how do you manage all that with about 90 employees in 17 different countries? I still don't understand.
Yeah, I think like we had to, I mean, the thing that we like really care about is it's not just what we build. Of course, like working on a file format is amazing. But we were like, we really care about how we are building this as well. And of course, we want to have fun while building this. And I've been in this journey for about like 7 years. Of course, to keep something exciting for 7 years is hard, but I still get excited every single day. So one part is that also, like I mentioned earlier, like trust and freedom. For example, a lot of companies, they would hire a lot of folks to manage other people, like managers to HR, people and culture. But a lot of those functions goes away based on how you structure the organization. For example, like if we have unlimited leaves, that means there's no HR to approve a leave. That means
that's crazy.
Yeah, so that means the HR function is now less, because there's nobody to kind of like really see how many or count how many leaves that you've taken, right? So people can start anytime. Like it's flexible hours as well, right? Across all of these time zones. So we were like, teams, just figure what works best with you, rather than us come in and say, this is the way that you need to work. We have like a couple of teams as well. Like everybody just figure your way out. If somebody's taking leave, you are adult enough. You can talk to other people within the team and just figure this thing out, because that also means there's reliability between other people as well. So imagine if I'm taking a leave and you took over my work, I know when you take a leave, I will at least you know that when you take a leave, I'll be there to support you and help you out as well, right?
So a very supportive ecosystem you've built. And how do you, because I'm assuming some people try to take advantage of that. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so there will always be outliers in kind of any structure. There'll be, even on the culture level, there are some people, and it's not like they're made for this is like a lot of things comes from character as well, right? So as founders, we try to learn and see what more can we do. Like, is this a great fit? Is this not? But something that we are very careful is not to penalize everybody else because of, let's say, a different way of these 2 or 3 people working. Like a lot of times, like one example is like when we look at people who took leaves, there was quite a lot of leave, like in general. But it's not like everybody took a lot of leave. It's just a very small portion of that. Because of that, if we have to make sure that everybody, like there's no unlimited leave, people were even complaining like, hey, you're taking the biggest perk. And the others were like, hey, you're kind of forcing us now to take a leave. We don't even take leaves, but you are like forcing us to take a leave, right? So I think those cases, how we address is bring everybody together and say, hey, look, this is the reality, but you will still have your unlimited leaves, but the underlying problem is operationally it shouldn't be disrupted. You're adult enough, figure that out within the teams as you take the leave, rather than us enforcing a rule that goes across the company, because it's almost impossible to give a factory-wide decision, say this will work for everyone. In a living and breathing organization, it won't work that way.
So you give each individual member like, oh, you're mature enough, and they take the responsibility. That's lovely.
Yeah, that I think like even when we hire people, the first interview is actually a culture interview, not the skill interview. Because in the culture interview, things that we look at, like there's the work that you do, but you have to do work with other people. There's no company that was ever built with just single one person. Like it's a group of folks, everybody contributing to that becomes a successful company, right? So I think the things that we kind of iterate is like, you're adult enough. We trust that you take care of yourself. We trust that you manage your time well. We trust that you do proactive communication, not just communication. Given that we are a remote company, we rely on you to proactively kind of reach out and communicate as well. And of course, have a more balanced life as well. So I think a lot of those things we kind of iterate at the beginning as well and as we go along.
I'm just curious what's your thought on this, because Steve Jobs was asked what is his favorite product he built, and he said it was the team. Would you agree with that, or what would you say? I'm just curious.
I think so. Yeah, similar. I think as a founder, as the company or the startup grows bigger, you're kind of looking for specialized people that can replace the things that you were doing initially, but they do it better than you. I think as companies grows now, you're filled with people that you know that is doing better than you in every single step. I think kind of feeling saying that, hey, I'm now can be fully replaced. That feeling, I think, gives that pleasure of like, hey, okay, I built the greatest things that I've done is actually the team, because they don't rely on me anymore. I have to rely on them to do everything.
Interesting. Is there something about business that you also, a question I haven't asked about business that you would like to talk about? Because there's a lot of things you told me, and yeah, I'm curious.
I think that's the favorite question, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. The question that you ask is the question, which is the most important thing. In any meeting or in any conversation, we usually ask this question like, what is one question that I haven't asked you that you wish to be asked? Or which you think that we should ask you, right?
In your internal meetings.
Yeah, so internal to like external as well, where there's a lot of like, usually we ask the questions that we think based on our knowledge and our learning, right? But there's a lot of times meetings are ended with the questions that we wish that they asked, but we didn't ask. So I think creating that space to kind of learn what we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. So kind of coming to any meeting with that space and saying, hey, what is that question what is one question that you should be asking that we haven't asked so far? That gives us a lot of clarity. The other question in anywhere is like, what stands out for you and what doesn't stand out for you? Like usually either pitching or talking to somebody else to get the feedback. Because now like question and answer is like a dance, right? but now you're kind of opening the space and say, hey, okay, like tell us honestly, how do you feel and strong about, and what do you feel not right about? Because usually we ask about feedback, and it's usually kind of, okay, what are the things to improve, but not what are the things that you're doing great, right? So when you put the question in that way, like what does stand out for you and what doesn't stand out for you, people kind of try to balance it. For 3 good things, I now have to give like 4 things to improve. And so I think these 2 questions, the questions like earlier, and then this question, I think these are 2 things.
Wow. And what would the question you would want to be asked right now?
I think this is very, very broad. Like how do you manage like as a state of person in a company, like how do you manage your emotional side of things? I think this is something that we don't usually think about. Is if I'm gonna go and kind of iterate on that, would be founders. I think we do the thing that is most difficult is context switching. I think as founders operate, in our case, when we look at 96 people, that means there's 96 context. This is leaving the product, the competitors, the growth, the sales, everything aside. You have 96 people with each one of them having their own sort of a context of whatever that they bring, right? So while juggling all of that, you still have a company to build. As a founder, if something is working well, it won't come to you. You have to deal with the shittiest problem always, right? You have to deal with the problems that other founders, not founders, like other team members to leads don't want to tackle. It usually comes to you. So you're kind of solving problems every single day or making decisions every single day that to solve a problem. So you kind of lie with all the problems. It's kind of not in a great place, but I think what excites is to see the team, what they're building and pushing out, and kind of see that is the positive of it, and that product being used by millions of the people in the world. That's also the positive side of things and growth. But also on a day in and day out, you're kind of working on solving a lot of these problems, and there's a lot of problems, right?
How do you go about managing your emotions personally for these things?
I think few ways to think about, even this is advice for remote as well. If you get a message, you're kind of reading that in the emotional state that you are in. If somebody sends you a message over Slack or something, you're kind of reading that. And if you're in a not really good mood, you will be like, hey, why does this person sends me the message this way? So I think it's not just a founder side, like remote communication is hard if you're not doing face-to-face. What I usually do is I read that message a few times so that there's no emotional attached to that. I'm now really kind of reading the message as it is and then try to tackle it, right? I think a lot of that is to do with context. If you don't have the context, rather than kind of assuming something and go along with it, try to get the context. If you have to talk to that person to get more context, because you're only making decisions based on those contexts.
I have a really good quote that it says, "Context is king," which it's lovely. And just talking about difficult situations. A lot of founders, they have difficult times at a certain point. If you can go in detail, what was a moment where it was super difficult and how did you survive that?
I think the early stages were more difficult because, of course, you're starting a company, you have co-founders, you need to go and pitch this company. You don't even know that it's going to be a real thing. You're also risking because you just quit your day job and just come full time on this, and with the hope that this could be. I think like early stages kind of trouble with the co-founders or any of those things, I think that needs to be sorted out early in the day. And these aren't the easiest conversations usually, but I think at the end it all works out. But again, the series of decisions that you either make or you don't make, that becomes that. For me, I think it was helpful. I have an 11-year-old, and usually I ask him about this stuff because he doesn't have the social construct in his mind yet. So He learns about all the context from me, what I share, and then he's like, okay, if I were you, this is how I would go about it, right? So I think he gave the best advices so far, both in relationship and also building the company as well, because he's not thinking about, okay, what would other person think, what would that person think, to like, usually there's a lot of noise in our head when we either make a decision or when we go through a rough time. That isn't there in the kids because they aren't exposed to that yet. So they give the best sound advice if you really ask them or give them the context.
If you could go into detail, what was an example of something he said that was really helpful?
Um, yeah, so I remember like when I shared like, hey, this is kind of our like we only started monetizing last year, right? So our team was growing, and I think this is one of the, I wouldn't say mistakes, but learning that a lot of founders, what they do is that they try to hire as many as people you can in a very, very fast pace. That means the quality of the candidate sometimes goes lower as well, right? So he asked me like, hey, how much are you burning, sort of like, and how much money in the
11-year-old?
bank? Yeah. And the like first answer, like he said, was, oh, you have too many people. You have too many people. You hired too many people. And I think that's something that not just him, like investors, to tons of people who would look at the company and say, hey, okay, you have too many people. It may not be lean. It may be helpful, but too many people doesn't also mean it's fast paced. Sometimes now you have to manage those people as well, right? So I think that was one. The other one is kind of like, he's really good with like personal sort of things. So I think tons of things that I learned from him is mostly regarding it. There was this time that he plays Roblox a lot, and he needs to buy some Roblox. We were like, hey, fine, can you go and make a pitch deck so that you can convince mom and dad to give you Roblox? So he created an entire pitch deck on Canva, like he was 8. And then so we looked at it and we were like, okay. So we did a term sheet. I was a board member, and his mom is the investor. Kind of wrote that in saying that, hey, we understand we might not be able to get this money back, but here's the growth that we are looking in your mind, right? So I think being exposed to all of that helps out. Now he started like, I truly believe that raising kids to be entrepreneurs is a great way to let kids learn about money and then also food and other stuff as well. So he's now started a sticker business where I have the Cricut and printer at home. So he's selling custom-made stickers, laminated, die cut, to his classmates. Take the order, use the Apple's like die cut from the iMessages, and use Canva to kind of design that a little bit and print it and die cut it and sell it back to school.
It's still amazing. He's 11, and he also has a podcast, like you've mentioned. We already went over this when we discussed, but what did you do as a father in his early stages? That allowed him to become like this.
Yeah.
And what are your lessons from being a father?
Yeah, I think I met him when he was around 4. So I think a lot of that part was kind of built on the mom side, where we treated him like an adult. That means there's no authority of saying like, hey, do this because we said so. A lot of them is like logic and conversations, and treat him like an adult. So even if we are discussing something about work to some personal relationship or any of that, we kind of include him in that conversation, and he kind of poke questions and ask and learn about those things. And so I think like if he comes and asks us about like, hey, what is Tinder? And we're like, hey, this is what Tinder is used for, right? So there's like conversations, very open conversations that we have with him, because I think the biggest like skill that you can learn is how to learn, because there's just too many stuffs coming up. So and these conversations are something that you can actually learn from. I think kind of makes him think like, okay, I can actually go and do this. I can try this, and trying and failing. I think this is the other part, but it's a great part of the journey.
And how do you manage your work-life balance? Because you are very busy, but you still have the time to help grow your son and also have a wife and a family. How do you manage it?
Oh, this is, I think like, because we are also remote, I think the question like very much applies in the state of mind, because even if you're not with the computer, you're still thinking, right? You're still thinking about the problem, or this person's problem, that person's problem as well. So it is hard, but I think kind of like blocking of time and say, this is the activity that I'm going to do with the son or with the family. The weekends are like usually off. Also as a founder, like I love building stuff. I love exploring stuff. Like AI stuff is great these days. So I also take those weekends, just try something on my own and learn. So that it's not really fully connected to the work that I do day in and day out. But in terms of day in and day out, I think this blocking time. He goes to school now, so throughout the day it's kind of very easy. But I think it's night is like you have to be like very dedicated, saying that okay, I need to be bed at X time because I have to wake up around 6:45 to drop him off to bus, right? So the day starts very early, and after the day is more of like family time.
Wow, wow. And then just talking about AI, it's a big buzzword. What was your experience like when ChatGPT 3.5 was released?
I think I was, or at least using copy.ai even before ChatGPT, and I think under the hood that they were using GPT-3. So that was my first part, where even few folks in the company, like we've got accounts for copy.ai so that we can do copies for social media to blog posts and then all of that too. So even before ChatGPT was introduced, we were kind of playing around that area to help create the content as well. And on the ChatGPT, it was mind-blowing for me, because a lot of smaller stuff that even on coding, like I'm really bad with regex, but if I need to write this, usually I'll go to Jao or somebody else in the team as well. So this was very easy. Like anything that I usually rely on, I was able to actually get to use it. So ChatGPT and Cloudy is like one of the two biggest things that I use daily now.
And how do you go about utilizing it for your business?
Yeah, so this is a big question that comes in, because we are also in the design space, and I know a lot of designers are like AI it's a good thing and also a bad thing, especially on the creativity area, where we don't want to be spammed too much with the AI content so that the originality goes away. The way that we think about AI in Lottie Fast is that we are empowering designers and developers, mostly designers, to create the content that gets deployed by developers, right? So on the designing side, what can we use AI to help the designers? That means AI will help you do the really good draft, so that you can kind of adjust and kind of design and change it the way that you want. So it helps with the most amount of time, right? So recently we've released text to vector. So we have our own creation tool where you can create any animation, just like After Effects on the web tool. And we have a plugin that we recently released called Text to Vector, which is if you write the text, it will create an image or object like an SVG that you can insert into the canvas, and now you can start animating. So that means previously you have to rely on a designer to give you the asset, or you'll have to go through a huge library to find the asset that you're looking for, but now you can just generate it so that you can just animate it and give it away.
How do you think the world will look like in the next 10 years?
It's very hard to imagine, because right now we're at the very, very early stage. We are kind of using AI to do a Google search, most of us. But I think the real power comes when the AI gets kind of embedded in every tool. I think it would be kind of a similar stage where a lot of things went to cloud. We don't now say cloud powered, it becomes a part of it. I think AI powered products would be like AI embedded in them, would be the biggest thing that will happen. That would kind of increase the productivity, increase the growth rate of any product usage, and usability of those products to the scales that we can't even imagine.
Mm. And just talking about AI, the reason why I'm really passionate is how it can help underprivileged people. And you come from Maldives, and I'm from Kyrgyzstan, and you try a lot to help. You host hackathons in Maldives and try to empower them. What would you recommend for maybe the listener at home who comes from Kyrgyzstan or somewhere just not in a good situation to have and work for these great companies? How to learn if they don't have the educational materials around? What would you say?
So in any of these journeys, there's a struggle. There's a struggle. Like startup journey is a struggle. Everything else is a struggle as well. And there's so many problems that you have to overcome in order for you to be great, or at least proceed at the end, right? Be genuinely curious and ask these questions and learn what you don't know. Why is this countries or operates this way in certain conditions? How can I actually push through this? And it's a part about not just the possibilities in the countries, it's also limitations in our mind as well sometimes. So we need to know and learn more about that. Traveling has helped me quite a lot to open up my mind to like different possibilities and things that I was usually limited by while living in an island. So I think traveling and be just curious and learn about things. Today you can be a master just using the AI to ask questions, learn, and that comes from genuine curiosity.
So find your curiosity, and using the internet, you can learn and use AI, and you can figure it out. You can get out of that situation.
Yeah. Yes.
Currently, what are your future goals with Lottie Flies and maybe even personally at the moment?
So Lottie Files is we want to do what, let's say, Canva did to design. We want to do that to motion, where we want like motion to be an easier and an accepted thing by everybody, and they think about motion when it comes to storytelling or building any sort of human experiences. So that's part about Lottie, and then of course for the Lottie format to be adapted as an official standard. It's so great that we've recently kind of like released that news with Linux. We are under Linux Foundation with Lottie Files, Google, Airbnb as a steering committee for this format, for this to be a standard, official standard. So that's great. There's a lot more coming in, of course, more. We feel like we're just getting started. So excited about what we are doing at Lottie. Personally, I'm also expecting like another family member to be added next month.
A son or a daughter?
Daughter. So Maldivian Korean mix. So
if you can, what's her name?
We haven't decided yet, but if she, it depends on like when she also borns as well. So June 1st is right now. So we're still deciding. But the challenge here is, again, you have to find a name that is accepted in the Maldives, in Korea, and then also English as well. So this is going to be a fun experience. So that's on the personal side. I wish that I travel more here in Korea. I've only been to Busan like last month. But Jeju, been there, but I want to go and explore a lot more.
We
take
can
my
give you
camera.
recommendations.
Oh, that would be lovely. I want to take my camera and just like capture the daily lives of Koreans. Yeah.
Yeah. And ending off, I think the last question, this is what I asked to all my guests, is if you could travel back in time to your 17-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
This is a hard one because I would just say just keep going. Because I think over the time I made a lot of mistakes, both personal-wise, both work-wise and career-wise, which helps me today. So it's very hard for me to go and say pinpoint one thing. I think I'll just encourage. I usually, when you do something crazy on a site, a lot of people are like, hey, this is a crazy guy trying to do UX. What is even UX, right? So people don't really appreciate or support the things that they don't comprehend or understand. So there aren't a lot of people who can push you, who can encourage you to keep on going. I would be that. Like, I would actually support myself and say, hey, like, you will find your path. Just keep going. Try new things. You will fail at things, but those becomes learnings rather than just treat them as failures, right? Like, I've had so much of those learnings or failures in the past to prepare me for what I'm doing today. And probably I would learn a lot of tons of things today, and probably I'll repeat some mistakes that I've had in the past, maybe because I haven't learned, that will help me in the future.
Yeah. And where can people find you at?
Yeah, so I'm very kind of like open on Twitter as well. So Twitter at really Nattu, Instagram mostly like stories of life. Yeah, Twitter I would say is the biggest place, and then of course LinkedIn for anybody who wants to touch, for both career advice, Lottie, animation, motion, any of that. Just say hi. It's always good to be connected.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Ladies
This
and
was amazing.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Natsu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're done.